Alleged office relationship that continues to shake up Bay Street tonight. Canada's biggest lender, RBC, the biggest bank, has dismissed one of its top executives over allegations that she was involved in an undisclosed personal relationship with another bank employee, a vice president. Chief Financial Officer Nadine Ahn is also alleged to have provided that employee with preferential treatment, including promotion and compensation increases, which apparently violated the bank's code of conduct. Both Ahn and the other employee were terminated on Friday. That, according to reports in the Globe and Mail that first broke this story. Now, this is not the first case of this nature in recent years, not by a long shot, but the consequences for those involved, for Nadine Ahn, the CFO, that is a huge position in a bank, needless to say, especially a big Canadian bank, are huge, not only because she was believed to have a very good chance of becoming RBC's next CEO. I mean, often the CFO is on their way up that ladder to the very top, but also for her immediate future. According to Bloomberg, she earned $4.1 million in direct pay in fiscal year 2023, which included, really most of it was bonuses. Still, it was stock awards and bonuses. Still, what has happened here? What are the rules? Because, of course, when it comes to two consenting adults, what are the rules within an organization? And this is yet another reminder that some of these issues around personal relationships and ethics reach not only through a company, but sometimes, allegedly, reach all the way up into the C-suite, up into the very, very upper echelons of an organization as big, as prestigious, and as powerful as RBC is in this country. Daniel Lublin is a nationally recognized workplace law expert and a partner at Whitten and Lublin in Toronto, employment lawyers. And he joins me now. Daniel, thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me.
This is one that's got a lot of people talking. I mean, certainly, there are a few financial institutions in this country as high profile as RBC, and in few positions within that institution as high profile as the chief financial officer. Just your first impressions of what's happened here.
I would say the nature of the public disclosure in this case is very unusual, that the bank or any bank would come out and share information related to its findings. I suppose that they have some obligation to, given the nature of the role, like the chief financial officer. They have to explain to the public why such a decision would be made to terminate an employee for misconduct. But I felt there was more detail in there that really supports the bank's narrative, which can potentially leave the bank open to exposure, legal exposure, if that's not something they can ultimately prove. So normally you don't see the level of informational disclosure as you do here, and depending on what the ex-employee decides to do, and almost certainly she'll get lawyers, and almost certainly she'll initiate some type of legal action. The bank may have left itself open to additional damages for kind of publicly dragging the story through the mud. And I'm not sure they had to go into that level of detail.
Right. This might be one of those cases where the information was already there. The reporters came to them with this information, and at that point, the institution would then try to protect its own reputation. Right. I mean, that you get that sense with how much other sourcing was in that reporting.
Well, I often hear the story. We don't comment on ongoing matters, or
right.
The bank treats all such issues as confidential. And normally, when clients of mine that I've worked with depart from banks, the banks generally confirm that they won't share any information about an ex-employee's departure, the reasons for. All they ever do is share that so-and-so is no longer employed anymore. So, right. It's not overly difficult for them to take a more an approach that less is more.
In this case, just generally speaking, what are the guidelines here? Because, I think some people will look at this and think, okay, consenting adults, fine. Now, clearly within the reporting around this, and this is what the reporting says, there were allegations of a relationship with a subordinate who then was promoted, and there were some issues around, perception of conflict of interest. But where does the line exist in an institution such as RBC or others when it comes to these relationships?
Yeah. So here are the aggravating factors. So number one, you have a very senior employee in a position of authority or control, in a position to confer, deny benefits. It's unusual that it's a female who's the person who's fired. Normally, you see in these cases I've handled, it's been a male.
Mm-hmm.
in such a position that was accused of wrongdoing. So you have someone in a position to confer, deny benefit. And second is where this really goes over the edge. And if you want to know where the line is, I'm not of the understanding that the bank has a no relationship policy. I mean, I've met many, many very good people who've met and had long-term relationships and families based on meeting at banks and companies. I mean, there's certainly no law forbidding relationships at work here. The problem is that the allegation is that the chief financial officer gave special benefits to somebody who reported to her. In other words, as a result of the relationship, someone received something that he should not have necessarily received. And that then becomes a conflict of interest. It's definitely a conflict of interest if true, but also is very poor judgment and decision making. So normally what an executive would do who wants to enter into a consensual relationship is the executive's duty, whether this is written in a policy or not. I've always described it as a fiduciary duty of an executive, is to disclose the relationship to the employer. And then the employer can take steps to distance the person who's the subordinate from the relationship. So the executive can't be accused of favoritism. So in this case, what we would need to know is, did the former chief executive, did she disclose her relationship? And if so, and if the bank was aware of it and didn't take steps to remove the subordinate from the board, that's a whole different case than the one that we've been led to believe exists. But let's assume that didn't happen. The bright line here, the real problem is if the chief financial officer failed to disclose and then conferred benefits, special treatment benefits, and that's where you have a problem.
Presumably, an institution such as RBC would have investigated, which I believe they did. This came through an anonymous tip line, according to the reporting at the time. And that happened not that long ago, actually, less than a month ago at this point. Presumably, they would have carried out an investigation. And then before going ahead with this, they would have consulted their many lawyers. I imagine they have quite a large team of lawyers that would consider this sort of case, because it is such a high profile one. And the amounts and the impact on the employee are so massive.
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe I read in the Globe article last week that they engaged a third-party investigation, which is the gold standard now for addressing these things. I mean, it doesn't have to be done by an external law firm, but having engaged a third-party review certainly implies a level of objectivity and neutrality in the findings. The fact that it would have happened within a month is actually lightning quick, but doesn't surprise me given the nature of the players involved. And the seniority of the players involved. I mean, most investigations can take quite some time. A month is actually pretty fast. So having a third party perform the investigation and give a report to the bank saying these are our findings, what I can assume from this is that the bank felt very confident in its decision making to terminate the executive for just cause without any severance. I mean, that is considered the capital punishment of employment law. So I can only surmise, obviously, because I'm not involved, that the third-party review found evidence that was fairly strong in favor of supporting the termination for just cause.
Daniel Lublin is with us this half hour. He's a partner at Whitten and Lublin Employment Lawyers in Toronto. We're talking about the situation of Nadine Ahn, who up until last week was the chief financial officer at Canada's largest bank, RBC, so a huge position in the C-suite there. She has been dismissed with cause, apparently, by the bank for carrying out an undisclosed personal relationship with a subordinate who was also being promoted, apparently. So these are all things that have come out in reporting. We don't know all the facts, or at least all the details around all the facts. Daniel, when you look at this case, I mean, this is going to have a massive impact on her just with the way that she was let go, essentially, with cause, which means what?
Well, I'll say it's alleged cause, which I think is important. So the bank, the employer, has to make that decision at the time of termination. Are you going to dismiss an employee and pay severance, or are you alleging cause? And as we mentioned before, the bank obviously felt fairly comfortable to go right to what's considered the capital punishment of employment law, because terminating someone for cause means you're not paying them any severance. Mm-hmm. The employee in question was there. I understood it to be her entire career, obviously occupying a very senior job. And now that she's been publicly criticized, I would say publicly criticized by the bank, and her name is out there for all the wrong reasons, will certainly make reemployment much more difficult. So if as an employee, this employee in question, there are really two cases here. The first case, or the first bucket of the case, is if there wasn't cause, and if the bank can't prove cause because it's the bank's onus, what's an appropriate severance package? And then the second case, which she would be contemplating, is, did the bank do anything in the allegation of making the allegation of cause, or in the sharing the information with the general public that went above and beyond what it needed to, and can be considered behaving in bad faith? So employers have an obligation of fair dealing with employees at the time of their departure, especially around termination events, because people are considered vulnerable at the time of termination. So if the bank can't demonstrate that what it said happened, not only can this individual win a substantial severance package, but she would also, in my opinion, be very likely to receive some sort of additional compensation because the punitive way the bank went about this, I mean, publicly airing the dirty laundry, probably went beyond what was necessary, and has caused the individual, will likely cause the individual a significantly greater period of unemployment. So if I were her lawyer, we'd be talking about a very large case right now.
Right. I think just to clarify what the bank said to the Globe and Mail was RBC became aware of the allegations on March 11th and immediately launched an investigation. We engaged outside legal counsel to investigate. Based on a review of the evidence, we terminated employment for both individuals on April the 5th. So that would both be the CFO and the subordinate question with whom she was having the alleged affair. I suppose you don't think this story is anywhere near over.
So I believe that she's probably consulting with attorneys, lawyers, for the purposes of bringing a case. I also think, she's laid low, hasn't made any statements. There's a strategy in that. But there's a different strategy, which is making some type of public statement if you disagree with it. If you disagree with the way that, if she disagrees with the way that the banks characterized her departure, it may be important for her to stand up and say what her side of the story is. But no, I think this will play out in a really sexy court case that we'll probably hear about in the coming months. A very large statement of claim, something in the nature of like $10 million or more, talking about how she would justify or attempt to put her spin on why what she did either wasn't cause for dismissal, was condoned by the bank. Maybe she's aware of instances where other individuals have engaged in similar behavior, had relationships with subordinates that were not fired. That would certainly be things that I would be investigating if I were her lawyer. I'd be looking at all of the different angles and trying to poke holes in the bank's theory of the case, but also I'd be looking at trying to demonstrate why this type of thing happens all the time and the bank doesn't take the same approach towards other senior employees. I mean, it has to be put in context. I hate that word right now, but it has to be put in context. So those are the things that she should be exploring.
What a mess, though. I mean, what a mess considering in the circumstances. I mean, this is a high profile job, a high profile person at a very high profile Canadian institution. And this is just a reminder. I mean, she's certainly not the first to find herself in this situation, but it always shocks me that people in those in the C-suite get caught up in these things when really they're put there because of their good judgment. I think that's sort of the basis of which everything else is built on, whether it be performance, is their ability to judge, right?
Well, absolutely. She would have been considered a complete star to be at the top of the food chain for this particular institution. So yeah, her judgment would be very much something that's considered here in both directions, getting there and also making the decision to allegedly not share the relationship with the bank, and then to allegedly provide benefits to the subordinate she was in a relationship with. So certainly judgment is at the core of this case.
Daniel, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Ben. Anytime.
We're talking about